So far, there have been over 50 million confirmed cases of the coronavirus around the world. The virus has taken the lives of over 1.3 million people worldwide. The Johns Hopkins report that the coronavirus has about a 2.3 moderate percent rate. The virus has impacted the lives of everyone worldwide. Around 800 years ago, a devastating plague called the Black Death ravaged, killing nearly half the population of Europe. Today, we will inform you about the Black Death that occurred in the mid 1300s. We have researched the plague and thoroughly studied it to provide you with accurate information. The Black Death was a significant part of human history. We know what it is like to be caused what it is like to be in a pandemic because of COVID. We will begin by discussing the causes and symptoms of the plague, then following how the plague spread, and finally we will report the death tolls from the plague. Let's begin and take a look at exactly where the plague came from and how the victims were identified.
According to Cartwright, the Black Death came from a bacteria called Yersinia pestis from the Bacillus family. The Black Death came and affected the lymph nodes in the armpit and groin area. The bacteria caused severe swelling of the lymph nodes, causing internal bleeding, and this internal bleeding led to black sores in those areas. This internal bleeding and black sores spread throughout the entire body. Other smaller symptoms of the Black Plague include a severe fever and joint pains. If the disease was left untreated for 72 hours, the mortality rate jumped from 30% to 70%. A few treatments were spiritual or physical treatments. According to Hajar, a cardiologist from Qatar, 2 physical treatments were boil lacing and bloodletting. Bloodletting is the surgical removal of a patient's blood in order to treat a disease. Boil lacing is cutting open any sores of the body and letting all the pus run out in order to treat a disease. These 2 methods were very unsanitary and not very safe, as the sanitary measures of the medieval times were not near where they are today. Other methods were oils and flowers. And the childhood song Ring Around a Rosie, the line pocket full of posy comes from the belief that if you kept flowers around you, breathing in the air from the flowers would help cure this disease. Now that we know the causes and symptoms of the Black Death, let's look at how it spread throughout Europe.
The outbreak that led to Europe. It first began to spread through the Mongol army in China. The Mongol army was very devastated by this plague. The Mongol army ruler, Jambain's army, was trying to capture the port of Kaffa, but with the losses occurred, he decided that he was going to catapult the infected dead corpses into the port of Kaffa. From there, the ships of Kaffa carried the plague to Italy and Africa, and there later into Europe. It mostly spread through rodent-infested grain ships and trading routes. In August of 1348, it reached the city of Bristol in England and started its long journey through Europe. The plague entered through 4 rodent-infested grain ships from Kaffa. According to the State of Maine CDC, Black Death was airborne, and rats assisted greatly in transporting it. By 1349, the plague found its way into France, Spain, England, and Ireland through trade routes. By 1352, the plague reached the rest of Europe, but shortly after, it eventually died out. The Black Death occurred several more times throughout history, although each outbreak killed less and less people until it was eventually ineffective. The plague spread throughout Europe as people fled from infected cities to infected cities. These people did not know they were infected, and when an outbreak occurred in their city, they would flee the city to another. And that was the greatest means of transporting the plague throughout Europe. Rodents were also one of the main reasons why it spread through Europe so quickly, and it was the main reason that it appeared in Europe in the first place. As the plague spread, many people had different views on how to control the plague. According to Mark, the plague spread, there was 5 ways thought to control the plague, including animal cures, religious cures, fleeing the infected areas, and quarantining and social distancing. It was found that really only quarantining and social distancing were effective means in containing the virus, the pandemic, the plague. It was so effective that it still remains the main way of controlling a pandemic, and it is advised that we do the same during COVID. For our last point, let us talk about the death toll from the Black Plague.
The Black Plague impacted the region. It hit to varying extents. For instance, the Italian city of Milan managed to avoid a significant decrease in its population, whereas its sister city of Florence lost 50,000 of its 85,000 citizens due to the plague. This is a 59% decrease in its population, indicating that the plague had a massive impact. Another city that was hit hard was Paris, France, where the plague killed upwards of about 800 people per day during its peak. Figures for the death toll range from 25 to 30 million people in Europe alone between the years of 1347 and 1352 CE. Europe's population wouldn't return to the way it was before the pandemic hit until after 1550 CE, over 200 years after the pandemic started. The massive death toll had a significant impact on the lives of everyone in these regions. The ruling class was actually hit just as hard as the poor and working class. The plague killed both human workers and livestock that managed the agricultural systems that many countries were dependent on. The Black Death contributed directly to labor shortages, reduced wages, and a decreased demand for goods and services. And as the plague worsened, peasants found themselves in a position to bargain with serfs, and as their demands increased, uprisings resulted. And in an effort to suppress these uprisings, European leaders dispatched armies and militias to end the conflict. And as these workers continued to perish, the deaths resulting directly from the plague only continued to increase. And these revolts took place all throughout Europe, including one in Paris, one in Florence, and one in London across a span of 30 years. And from these, from the statistics, it's clear that the death toll from not only from the plague, but also from the revolts that resulted from it were massive, and they were a disruption to Europe's social and economic order. And now that we've discussed the impact of the plague, both socially and economically, we'll go back to where we started and discuss why all of this is important in the first place.
Since we begun, we have gone over the history of the Black Death, explaining symptoms and causes, also how it was spread through the air and by rats, and how it caused parts of your body to swell up and turn black. We also discussed how it arrived to Europe through 4 grain ships infested with rodents that came from Italy. Lastly, we talked about how the death toll and how many people were killed during the plague during the active years. The major impact of the Black Death can be seen by the fact that it left millions of people dead. During this pandemic, many methods were tried to control it, but few were only effective. One thing that we have learned from the plague is that quarantining and social distancing are always going to be effective ways to prevent the spread of diseases. Knowing this, we can work to slow the spread of COVID-19 down. Global pandemics will always be around, but it is important that we learn from the previous pandemics, such as the Black Plague, and apply the knowledge to the current pandemics, such as the coronavirus. Now, make sure you're social distancing, be safe, and wear a mask.